Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into part 4 of a truly fantastic 8-part tutorial called IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This is brought to us by Virtualization Options LLC, which is a Colorado-based technology research, education, and advisory group. Now, this explainer is specifically built for sysadmins and tech support folks who already know their way around IPv4 troubleshooting, but are now tasked with migrating their organization over to IPv6. So, if you've been relying on IPv4 your whole career, buckle up because we are going to completely rewire your networking brain today. We're moving way past those legacy systems and looking at how modern IPv6 environments actually behave in the wild. Because honestly, the old rules, they just don't apply anymore.
All right, here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with unlearning that IPv4 muscle memory. Then we'll tackle address and gateway diagnostics, brave the dreaded MTU black hole, navigate some transition tunnels, and wrap up with OS quirks and VPN leaks. Let's get right to it. Okay, Section 1, Unlearning IPv4 Muscle Memory. It is time to reset the baseline, folks.
To really fix IPv6, we have to stop treating it like IPv4. It is not just the same protocol with a longer license plate, it fundamentally changes the rules of the road. For example, in IPv6, multicast replaces broadcast entirely. So if you're trying to use tools like pinging the old 255.255.255.255 broadcast address, it's just going to do absolutely nothing. It's completely meaningless now. And here's the big one. NAT, or Network Address Translation, is largely a thing of the past. Suddenly, every single device is potentially globally routable. Think about that. It literally flips your traditional firewall design and all your legacy security assumptions completely upside down. Just take a look at this interface behavior. In the IPv4 world, you expect to see one neat little single address, like 192.168.1.10, right? But check out the IPv6 side. You've got a link local address, a global unicast address, maybe some temporary privacy addresses, all just happily hanging out together on a single adapter. And here's the crucial takeaway. That is completely normal. It is not a misconfiguration. If you start troubleshooting a machine just because it has 3 or 4 IPv6 addresses, you are going to be chasing ghosts for hours. Moving on to Section 2, Address and Gateway Diagnostics. Let's look at how devices actually get their network parameters safely.
So when an IPv6 host boots up, it doesn't just blindly assume its address is safe to use. Instead, it kicks off this process called Duplicate Address Detection, or DAD, by sending out a neighbor solicitation. Now, if it actually detects a conflict, which honestly is pretty rare, but definitely happens if you've got cloned VMs sharing a MAC address, the host flags that address as DAD failed, and it just totally halts global connectivity. The interface might look like it's up, but absolutely no traffic is routing. If you're on a Linux box, you can run IP-6 address show, and if you spot that DAD failed flag, boom, there's your smoking gun.
Now let's talk about gateways, because this is a massive shift. An IPv4 DHCP hands out a persistent lease and you're good to go. But IPv6, it relies on periodic router advertisements, or RAs, to keep that default gateway alive. This means if those RAs get blocked by a misconfigured switch somewhere, your hosts are going to silently drop their default route. Poof, gone. Also, if you happen to see a router sending an RA with a lifetime of exactly 0, that's not a bug. That is an explicit command telling clients to immediately stop using it as a gateway. So tying into that, you need to remember that the Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or NDP, has entirely replaced ARP. And since IPv6 leans so heavily on multicast to make NDP work, your hardware has to be configured for it. Specifically, if your switches don't have MLD snooping enabled, they're just going to flood all that NDP multicast traffic to every single port on the switch. That'll completely tank your network performance and needlessly expose neighbor info everywhere. All right, on to Section 3, the MTU black hole. Get ready, because this is one of the most frustrating things you'll ever troubleshoot. Picture this scenario. You get an escalated ticket. The user says they can ping a destination perfectly fine. Great, right? But the second they try to open an SSH session or load a heavy HTTPS site or copy a large file, the connection just hangs, indefinitely, right after the handshake. It feels totally random, and honestly, it feels impossible. So what is actually happening here? Well, this classic maddening symptom is almost always a path MTU discovery failure. Here's the breakdown. Those small ping packets, they fit right through every link on the network without a problem. But a large file transfer packet hits a router somewhere down the line that has a smaller MTU limit. Naturally, that router sends back an ICMP VO6 packet too big message, that's a type 2 message, telling the sender to shrink the packet size. But if you have an overzealous firewall blocking that ICMP VO6 message, the sender literally never gets the memo.
The router just silently drops the big packets and you get a black hole. To fix this, you absolutely have to permit Type 2 traffic on your firewalls or, as a workaround, configure TCP MSS clamping on your router interfaces.
And that brings us to this beautiful cheat sheet, which really highlights your new golden rule. You cannot, I repeat, cannot, blindly block ICMP anymore like we used to do in IPv4. This chart shows you exactly which ICMPv6 types are non-negotiable. Like we just said, Type 2 is mandatory for path MTU discovery, and C types 133 through 137, those are absolutely vital for neighbor discovery. If you block those, you literally break the fundamental routing of your network.
Section 4. Navigating IPv6 Transition Tunnels. Let's talk about bridging the gap between old and new.
So, in an IPv6-only world, your clients still inevitably need to talk to the legacy IPv4 internet. To pull this off, we use two mechanisms working in tandem, NAT64 and DNS64. It's a pretty elegant dance, actually. DNS64 basically synthesizes a fake IPv6 AAA record for a host that only has IPv4. Then, NAT64 handles the heavy lifting of translating that traffic at the gateway. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. This whole system instantly shatters if an application hardcodes an IPv4 address. Like, if a script tries to hit 1.2.3.4 directly, it bypasses DNS entirely, which means NAT64 never even gets triggered. Total failure.
You might also run into legacy 6 and 4 tunnels. This is where your IPv6 traffic is quite literally stuffed inside an IPv4 header. If you're troubleshooting these, you've got to remember they rely on IP protocol 41. And here's the kicker about Protocol 41. It has absolutely zero concept of port numbers. Because of that, it breaks incredibly easily if it hits any kind of NAT on its path. Plus, all that extra IPv4 wrapping shrinks your effective IPv6 MTU down to 1480 bytes, which, you guessed it, leads us right back into the danger zone of those MTU black holes we just talked about.
Finally, Section 5, OS quirks and VPN leaks. Time to look at the very edge of the network.
When you're troubleshooting mobile endpoints, the experience is wildly different depending on what phone you're actually holding. Take Apple's iOS, for example. It is incredibly aggressive about rotating privacy addresses on a per-network basis just to stop tracking, and it totally hides any manual IPv6 configurations from the user. It's really hard to see what's going on under the hood. Android, on the other hand, is a bit more transparent. It actually gives you standard visibility into its IPv6 addressing right there in the advanced Wi-Fi settings, so always know the quirks of the device you're diagnosing.
And then, oh boy, we have VPNs. VPNs are just notorious for IPv6 split tunnel leaks. Here's what goes down. An older VPN client fires up, and it beautifully secures all the IPv4 traffic, but it completely ignores the IPv6 traffic. Suddenly, you've got clients accidentally bypassing your entire corporate security policy because their IPv6 traffic is just bleeding straight out of their local interface to the internet. It is a massive security risk. If you're dealing with DNS failures here, you can diagnose them using dig plus short, AAA. And to actually plug that leak, you need to configure your VPN to explicitly push a /0 route, which is the IPv6 default route, straight through the tunnel. Okay, let's recap our unyielding golden rules for this new networking era. Rule number 1, expect multiple IPv6 addresses per interface. It's totally fine. It means the system is doing exactly what it should. Rule number 2, when things break, use explicit dual-stack tools like curl6 to isolate your IPv6 traffic. Otherwise, IPv4 is just going to silently fail over and cover up your errors. And rule number 3, if you remember nothing else today, never, ever block ICMPv6 entirely. Just don't do it.
So I'll leave you with this. Looking at your own environment right now today, are your firewalls actually configured for true dual-stack routing? Have you whitelisted those critical ICMPv6 types we talked about? Or are you sitting on a PMTUD black hole just waiting to silently swallow your company's next major file transfer? Seriously, go check those access control lists today. Now keep in mind this was just part 4 of the 8-part tutorial series from Virtualization Options, so we still have plenty more ground to cover on securing your infrastructure. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy troubleshooting out there.